Well, good morning, sports fans, and here we are in the bunker, back in the bunker, the AD Vantage Point, put to you by the New York State Athletic Administrators Association, a podcast for athletes, coaches, and the overall athletic community. And you can hear us on Spotify, and we're also through Anchor FM, along with Apple Podcasts. So it's great to be back. It's been a while. I do have a special guest. This isn't going to be my rant and rave for 30 minutes like it used to be. So we do have a special guest today, and we have Mark Koesterer. Mark Koesterer is the CEO of the Players NIL. And for those of you that are seeing this on video, you can see the logo up in the upper right-hand corner of his screen. NIL, not to be confused with NLI, which a lot of people are confusing National Letter of Intent with NIL, is name, image, and likeness. And this is a new trend in interscholastic and collegiate athletics, where going back to the O'Bannon case in UCLA, where they can market themselves now and make money off of their personal brand. And Mark's company does it a little bit different. And I had an opportunity to look at some of the things he does, and I'm very impressed with it. But I'm going to let Mark take over here and tell us a little bit about himself, a little bit about the company, and about their program. So, Mark, it's all yours.
Well, first of all, thank you, Jim. I appreciate the opportunity to share our story, and I look forward to trying to communicate with some of your viewers. And I appreciate the opportunity to hopefully educate people on what's going on in the world of name, image, and likeness.
Appreciate that. It's, again, your company is how old now? How long have you been in business?
Well, all of January 12th, 2022, so 7 months.
7 months. So if we were on Shark Tank right now, you know, I'd ask if you're how much you've made, and think I'm not going to do that. We're not going to talk about how much you've made on it. That's not the issue here, because it's not a charitable organization, obviously. But your approach is different. And there's, in my little research, my little tiny bit of research, I see that there's right now 50 to 70 companies out there that at least popped up on Twitter, on social media, that I saw that are doing NIL. At least they brand themselves as NIL. And what makes your NIL brand or promotion different than what we're seeing out there in the general market like now? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, and I think it goes back to my family history. So I'm originally a New Yorker, born and raised on Long Island. I was fortunate enough, my father was an educator, and he gave me the advice early on to use athletics to better my life. And that meant, you know, academically, socially, and educationally. And I was fortunate enough to go on to play sports in college. I took my father's guidance and I applied it to my adult life. And I think I've done a good job of using athletics to better the lives of the people around us. And so by that, you know, working in the community, helping student athletes, helping my own children, 4 of whom went on to play sports in college. So I have a deep knowledge of athletics, a deep knowledge of the journey from high school to college and the journey beyond. And when name, image, and likeness was officially approved, which was only July 1st, 2021, so just 12 plus months ago, I did a deep dive into those 50 to 70 companies that you talked about, and the majority of them all were focused on making deals. In other words, trying to create a relationship between a brand and a student athlete, and to profit from that putting together, from that connection. So essentially becoming agents. And while it's important, and while it's an important part of the wheel, what I learned in my research, Jim, was that a lot of these agents are predatory in nature, and the business is predatory in nature, taking between 10 and 30% of the revenue. In other words, a commission of between 10 and 30% out of the student athlete's pocket. And I just felt like that was kind of a predatory system, and not one that I was really interested in being part of. And as I dove into it a little bit more, Jim, what I realized was the one thing that was missing was education. And I don't care, and we could talk about what's happened in the first year, but I don't care if you're going to a Power 5 football school or you're going to a Division III softball program here in the Northeast. NIL is available, and education would be paramount.
And it's interesting you say that, because the initial sell on NIL was, it was really for that Division I athlete whose picture went on to the gaming portion of it. They were using their images in games for the NCAA. So that was really the impetus for this. But so how do we tell the Division III athlete that they have just as much value as a Division I athlete when it comes to personal branding and NIL?
Well, at its foundation, NIL was put together and is intended for everyone. And in this past
Right.
academic year, almost 500,000 college athletes across the country. So that's men's, women's, Division 1, 2, 3, NAIA, fall, winter, spring sports. So that's a lot of kids. We like to say that the headlines and the newsworthy stories are the top 2%, right? They're the quarterback at Alabama, they're the point guard at Kentucky, et cetera, et cetera. But that leaves 98% that are not afforded those opportunities that the big schools provide. Not the support, not the connections to sponsors and donors. And so it really becomes a business. And when you break that down, there's no difference between a Division I baseball player and a Division III swimmer in terms of their ability to tell a story, to create an audience, to create a following, and to create a business relationship with a brand that they get paid to market.
And again, selling that part to that person, we see it now. We'll see kids starting to brand themselves on Twitter. Let's say, I'm blessed to have received this offer from, and then it's a Division III school. Is that really just the initial stage of branding for an athlete when they do something along those lines?
Yeah, I think, for the first, we'll call it 20 years now of social media, most kids, we'll call them kids because that's the generation, had a following that was pretty much friends and family, right? It was teammates, it was classmates, it was Aunt Sally, it was Uncle Joe.
Right.
They shared pictures of their vacation, of their food, of their life. And that circle was fairly tight. I hate to say it, but Hollywood has created an influencer world whereby we now have expanded that world, that circle. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, we've created business opportunities. Now, are you going to be a Division III athlete and get a national deal with a major brand like Coke or Pepsi or Gatorade, General Motors? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that there aren't regional brands, local marketplace brands that wouldn't value your connection to an audience. So the key is, how do you build an audience? How do you negotiate that relationship? And then how do you execute? And that's what the Players NIL is all about.
And that's where I want to go next, because your format is so business based. You have the 5 pillars that you talk about. I want you to talk a little bit more about the 5 pillars and get in depth about, because that's really your brand. Your brand is the 5 pillars that I see. So why don't you give us a little bit of background on that?
Yeah, and so it's evolving. Like NIL, every day I wake up, there's something more on the internet. When we first started, we were direct to consumer mindset, selling an online educational class that the student athletes and their family could download and self-learn and self-teach, a 5 to 7 hour program totally. What we've evolved to today is more of a athlete-focused center of excellence. And by that, I mean a more global approach to helping student athletes. And we have a philosophy where we want to ingest 16-year-old student athletes into our system, so closely tied to juniors in high school, educate them, give them the foundation and the fundamentals that they can use during the recruiting process, during the college decision process. Then, of course, help them and guide them through the college process. And here's the thing that's really taken on legs is post-career guidance. What do you do when the ball stops bouncing? If your whole self-worth was because you could throw a baseball fast, and now you're not asked to do that anymore, who are you? What is your future? What is your professional opportunity? What is your personal life like? What's your mental health like? And so our first offering is the 5 Pillars course, as you mentioned. And while it's focused on NIL opportunities, they really are life skills. And the 5 pillars start with digital marketing and branding. So every student athlete that wants to be in business needs to know that. Every college student today probably needs to know that. The second one would be influencer and brand relationships. So if you have a following, how can you negotiate, connect with, tell a story to a brand whereby they will pay you to promote them? The third is a little bit more mechanical, but almost important, is tax, legal, and compliance. The tax and legal, pretty straightforward. There's horror stories in the first year of NIL of student athletes signing agreements that they never understood what they were giving away. Lifetime rights, deferred payments, performance-based things that are illegal with the NCAA. And so guidance around that. And then compliance, because it's been the Wild West for the first year, we're going to have a rollback. There's going to be some guardrails, as Nick Saban said at the SEC meetings yesterday. That's 3. 4 would be something that's really near and dear to me, and that's community service and philanthropy. You know, as I said, using athletics to better the lives of the people around us. If you're a Division III athlete and you come home for the summer to your town, those 10 and 12-year-olds still look up to you, whether you played on ESPN in the World Series or not. You know, you're the biggest thing they've ever seen. You throw faster, you run faster, and that's a great opportunity to connect with an audience, to give back, to build a brand outside of sports. That's pillar 4. Pillar 5 is essentially the wrap up of all of this is financial literacy. And me included, there isn't anybody that can't benefit from financial literacy. And those are the 5 pillars that we think student athletes need to at least understand, if not master, in order to maximize their NIL opportunities.
And I know that some of the sports management programs in schools now are dealing with just those same pillars. The difference here, obviously, it's more of a, well, because it's online, it's one-on-one. We're not talking about large group settings where a kid could get shut down. It's learn at your own pace type learning. The one thing I did like, and I think that this is an advantage, like I've been involved in online courses for a long time now, where you just listen. This is, believe it or not, the Players NIL is interactive, where an athlete can go in and type in answers to questions. They'll ask questions there and they get to see and think, and it becomes a thoughtful process in the educational process for them to respond. I mean, obviously they're not getting graded on it, but I kind of like that format better. Why did you include that? Just, I know the obvious reason is because of repetition and just to get them to understand each other, but am I saying pretty much what your thoughts were on that?
Yeah, exactly. And thank you for pointing that out. Look, I mean, the pandemic has pretty much burned everyone out on online learning. I don't care if you're an adult or, and so grabbing young people's attention is a challenge. Keeping their attention is a challenge. And we really, you know, this is not a pass-fail class. This is an education class that hopefully they're going to enjoy. Hopefully they're going to benefit from, and we want to be thought-provoking, right? So the whole idea about NIL is being creative and entrepreneurial. And that means sometimes thinking outside of the box, not being a traditional learner, not being a traditional thinker, and not thinking traditional business, because today's digital world, you can build a brand overnight and you can kill a brand overnight. And those are 2 very powerful things. We want to make sure that they make good decisions and that they build a brand overnight.
And again, I like that. You know, we talk about, you know, millennials and their difficult time we have dealing with millennials right now. No offense to anybody who's listening, who's a millennial, but you guys are really a pain in the neck sometimes with your gimme, 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 gimme. I tend to see that you're teaching kids to be very pragmatic in their approach to their lives as they go forward. And that's why when you said life lessons, that's the first thing that came to my mind when I saw the pillars was, this isn't just for the athlete. This is for anyone that really, it could be for the marching band kid. It could be for the theater kid. It could be for a special needs kid. Because if you look at some of the commercials now, you're starting to see those underserviced populations appear more in a larger brand or just a brand for themselves. And I don't know if I'm asking a question here or not, but maybe can you make a statement to that part of it? Is that how you see things?
Yeah, you know, as the father of 5 college graduates and having gone through this leadership adventure, I realized that times are a little bit different than when you and I graduated from college, and the work mindset is different. And the pandemic again has changed that. I recently had an opportunity to bump into a graduating college student in New York City from Columbia University and his father. He was from California, great school, you know, seemed to be a bright young man. And I said, so, you know, where are you going to work? You know, Wall Street, you know, Madison Avenue, what are you doing? And he said, I'm going to work for a startup. And I looked at the father, and the father rolled his eyes and he said, today's kids. And so I think, Jim, you know, what we have in the back of our minds with the Players NIL is probably a lot of these kids are not going to go to 9-to-5 jobs and work in a cubicle.
Right.
You know, the traditional work environment probably isn't going to work for them. They've been to the top of the mountain in terms of freedom and decision-making, and they're not coming back down. And so that's why the life skills part of this is real, because there's a good chance that these kids are going to start businesses. They're going to go to work for startups. They're going to create online work environments. and digital marketing and being able to read a contract and social media and financial literacy, these things are going to be paramount for their lives.
I couldn't agree with you more on this. We fight these trends, but change is, you're actually writing a course on change right now for the national organization. And this is a dramatic change, but more for the hierarchy to see that we have to accept the way the kids are going to be and understand that this is still going to be the most efficient way to do things. You're building a culture of not just athletes, but people that are going to service society in a different way. What do they always say, that 85% of the jobs you're going to see in 5 or 7 years don't exist right now? They say that consistently, and this is what entrepreneur, it might be 95% with all the potential for entrepreneurs here. And this isn't just about getting a sponsor from the local pizza place, right, Mark?
Yeah, I think, look, NIL is different to every individual, and the top of the NIL game is a lot of work. It's a full-time job, and you add academics in and athletics, I'm not sure that it works for everyone. Interestingly, the self-proclaimed king of NIL after year one is a young man that has almost 70 NIL deals, and he's a football player and a track athlete at Norfolk State. Not a Power 5 school, probably never going to be on television, but he's made it his mission to build his brand and to create relationships and huge following, and he's monetizing that. And that's something that he'll be able to do for the rest of his life.
I agree. What does someone need to come to the table with when they take your courses? What do they need to have as their mindset coming into you? Is it just, I want to make a lot of money, or is what do you try to coach them on to come in with their mindset they need to come in with?
Well, again, not to put us in an age category, but those of us of a certain age, we realize that money isn't everything. Of course, sometimes it's the goal, and NIL is a great example of that. If you want to be an NIL millionaire, you probably have to have some fundamentals beyond academics. You better be tall, you better be fast, you better be strong, and you better go to a Power 5 school. Okay, right. That's just the facts. But if you want to create something, build a relationship with the community, make some money, the median price paid in the first year of NIL was somewhere between $50 and $60, right? So it's not the $1 million athletes. The average price has grown because football has elevated it, but it's between $1,500 and $2,000 a month. I know when I was in college, if I could have made $500 a month by working a couple hours a week on the internet and doing some community service work and shaking hands with youth programs, I would have done it in a heartbeat. So I think number one is you got to want to learn. You got to think out of the box and non-traditional learning, and you have to be willing to put the time in to say, hey, this is something I want to invest my energy in, and I want to see what I can do with it.
Excellent. Now, from our standpoint, we're athletic directors. This is, the New York State Association. We have 780 members. We have 810 schools. How do we get the message to, aside from just sending your name out there and saying, hey, Mark's your guy, how do we get the message? How do we teach athletic directors about this? Is there something that they can go to learn more about it, to trickle it down to their coaches and their athletes and their community?
Yeah, for sure. I think education is important. And because it's so new and fast moving, and because it's sensationalized, I think a lot of athletic directors, particularly in high school, probably have shied away from it. They're probably not sure, and they're worried and they're nervous, and they are unsteady on their feet about guidance to give. And student athletes and their families are the same way. So everyone's floating around in the same room. They're all afraid to say they don't know the answers. And so I think what the Players NIL would like to do is to provide some guidance. One of our next phase, or our next phase, will be to create a curriculum for athletic directors, administrators, and coaches. Right? How do you administrate NIL education is really what we'll talk about. You don't have to be a subject matter expert, but you have to understand what the subjects are that you need to know. And you need to know where the resources are to guide the student athletes and their families, and to maybe throw some caution to the wind about, before you sign that contract, maybe somebody should look at it. And then, because of the compliance issue rolling back, there are some rules in New York State, for instance, in terms of using school marks that we want to stay away from, because we don't want to have anybody become ineligible or forfeit a season for a program.
And it's one of the things when they came to us last year and we took on NIL immediately. Dr. Zayas, the executive director for New York State Public High School, we were, I think, the first or second state to say NIL is acceptable here and we could do it. And we're all sitting back going, well, what the hell do we do next? You know, we have no idea what NIL, we kind of know what NIL is, but okay, so we do it. So what do we do? Stand by and watch. And we really want to be a part of the educational process here with our athletes and our coaches, especially with our coaches, because they're probably going to be the first ones contacted if someone is interested in a certain kid. I mean, my school, we just sent a kid down to Alabama to play soccer, female All-American. I'm sure if she knew about what she could have potentially done, she would have started doing it. Maybe she has, but we just haven't seen it yet. Or maybe mom and dad won't let her market herself.
You know, every family situation is different, but it's a good example. And so to answer your question though, Jim, I want to say out loud that, we'd love to work with you and we'd love to work with your constituency in providing our 5 Pillars course as a guideline. And then when we release the administrative part of it, we certainly would want to share that with your members. So, I look forward to trying to figure out how to do that with you.
It's a no-brainer for me. I'm one of those guys. It's not, my wife tells me I'm an impulse buyer, on things, but when something just clicks and it starts to fit in, we tend to compartmentalize our jobs. And if there's missing pieces in our jobs, and this isn't square peg in a round hole, this is a square peg in a square hole, because we need experts to tell us what we need to do. We can't just go and read an article because it's written by someone who maybe is just like you said earlier, it's just there to be an agent and wants that 10 to 30%. The Jerry Maguires of the world start popping up. So, certainly the relationship that we're developing here, and this is, you're not a sponsor of ours, you're not a vendor or anything like that. This is not a commercial for NIL, but it's really more of an educational thing on our part to get you out there to educate us, because you seem to be the only one doing it right now in the way you're doing it, from my research anyway. So,
yeah.
We're getting towards the last couple of minutes here, but I'll leave it with you asking any questions of me or making a statement in general. But if you've got 2 minutes, you've got 2 minutes.
Well, great. Thank you. And it's really simple. So, our mission statement is to use athletics to better our lives, use athletics to better the lives of the people around us. It was brought to me by my father, who was an educator, Cortland State grad, Aquinas High School in Rochester, New York. So a true New Yorker. So I have a deep passion for athletes. I have a deep passion for athletics, for coaches who helped change and mold my life. And I believe that the role of your athletic directors and your administrators is the same. It's about helping student athletes, about changing lives one by one. And the Players NIL is here for the right reason. And we certainly want to work with you to educate and create opportunities. And we'd like to be bold and say we want to change thousands of lives.
Excellent. I'll let you pitch a website and a handle if you want.
Perfect. It's theplayersnil.com, really simple. And all of our social handles are the same, @theplayersnil.
And that's a key point about that, because we talk about branding and you want to be consistent with your branding throughout your social media so you don't have 40 different addresses. I got 2 out of 3 for us. I got NYS888-6 for Instagram and Twitter, but Facebook, I did something different, which was silly on my part. I have to take the course. I have to learn. So
there you go.
Listen, Mark, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Sports fans, Mark Koesterer, got it. I got it right. Mark Koesterer, the Players NIL, a great program. I really think you should take a look at it. We're going to be more involved with listening to them as time goes on, since they are New Yorkers and understand what we're doing here in New York as far as NIL goes. But it's good to be back. And the AD Vantage Point is back online. We're going to be a little more consistent here now that I have some free time, a little bit more free time anyway. But we'll keep in touch. And it was great having you on today. And I look forward to getting up, and we'll be putting this online in a couple of hours, so everybody will get a chance to see it, Mark.
Perfect, Jim. I thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. All right, guys, live long and prosper, and we'll talk to you soon. But thanks again for coming on today.